He homeless boy didn't wake from the cold. He woke because the dog did. The retired canine was already on his feet, ears forward, body locked. Not fear, memory, the kind that knows the difference between finding a life and losing one. Somewhere in the forest, a child was crying, not screaming, just a small, broken sound the world usually misses. The boy hesitated, because stopping meant questions, and questions had never been kind to him. But the dog was already moving. They found her between the trees. 12 years old, ankle twisted wrong, hands shaking too hard to stand. Her phone dead. The night getting colder by the second. That's when he knew the truth. If he waited for adults, if he waited for help, she wouldn't make it through the night. The forest looked safe. That was the lie. So the boy lifted her. The dog led the way. And without knowing who she was or who would come looking, he made a choice. One that would change all three of their lives before morning came. Pine Creek, Colorado, sat quietly at the edge of the Rockies, a town small enough that the forest always felt closer than the people. One main street, a handful of closed storefronts, a gas station whose lights buzzed until midnight and then went dark. Beyond the last houses, the land tilted upward and trees swallowed everything else. That night, late autumn settled in hard. Cold rolled down from the mountains faster than expected, dragging the temperature with it. The wind slipped between the pines in low, whispering currents, carrying the smell of damp soil and fallen needles. Clouds moved thick and heavy across the sky, dulling the moon until the forest floor lay mostly in shadow. It was the kind of night where sound traveled strangely, some noises vanishing, others echoing longer than they should. At the edge of that forest, far enough from town lights to be forgotten, Evan Miller slept lightly. Evan Miller was 15 years old, though life had carved him into someone older. He was lean, narrow-shouldered, with a body shaped by constant movement rather than comfort. His dark blonde hair was cut unevenly, short in places and longer in others, the result of a rushed trim months ago. His face was pale, his cheekbones sharp, and his gray-blue eyes held a watchfulness that never fully shut off, even when he slept. He wore layered clothes that didn't match, a faded hoodie under a second-hand jacket, jeans patched at one knee, boots whose soles were thinning. Evan didn't look dramatic or desperate. He looked unnoticed, which had become his survival skill. Being invisible kept adults from asking questions. Questions led to paperwork. Paperwork led to systems. Systems had already taught him they didn't bend for kids who didn't fit. Beside him lay Rex. Rex was a German shepherd, almost 9 years old, broad-chested and powerful even in stillness. His coat was thick, black and tan, dulled slightly with age and streaked with gray along his muzzle and shoulders. A thin scar ran beneath the fur of his left flank, invisible unless you knew where to look. His ears stayed alert even while resting, angled forward like he was listening to something far beyond the clearing. Rex had once been a K9 search and rescue dog. That past lived in his posture, the disciplined way he lay, the way his muscles never fully relaxed. He had been trained to find people in places no one else could reach, trained to keep going when others gave up. His retirement hadn't been planned. It had come after a mission that went wrong, one that ended with silence instead of rescue. Since then, Rex no longer wore a harness or badge, but the work hadn't left him. Evan had learned to trust that. The fire Evan had built earlier was barely a memory now, embers hidden under dirt and pine needles. Fire meant warmth, but it also meant attention, and attention was dangerous. Evan slept with one arm hooked loosely around his pack, breath shallow, ears tuned to the forest. Rex woke first. It wasn't sudden, a shift of weight, a quiet breath through his nose, his head lifted, ears snapping upright, body going still. Evan felt it before he saw it. He opened his eyes and sat up slowly, careful not to startle the dog. "What is it?" he whispered, barely audible. Rex didn't look at him. His gaze was fixed on the dark wall of trees ahead. His body wasn't tense with aggression or fear. It was focused. That set Evan on edge. Rex stood, tail low but steady, and took one step forward before stopping, as if waiting for confirmation. Evan's stomach tightened. Rex hadn't acted like this in months. Then Evan heard it. A sound so faint it almost blended into the wind. Not a scream, a soft, broken cry, interrupted by sharp breaths like someone trying not to make noise but failing. Evan froze. His first instinct rose fast and familiar. Don't get involved. People meant questions. Questions meant adults. Adults meant forms, names, places he didn't want to be pulled back into. Rex let out a low whine, not fear, concern. Evan dragged a hand down his face. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered under his breath. Rex was already moving. They followed the sound deeper into the forest, Rex leading with quiet certainty. The ground sloped downward, roots and rocks hidden beneath fallen needles. Evan moved carefully, heart pounding, boots barely crunching against the earth. The crying grew louder. They found her near a narrow clearing where the trees thinned just enough for a pale stripe of moonlight to cut through the clouds. The girl sat on the ground with her back pressed against a tree trunk, knees drawn close. She was small, 12 years old, with dark brown hair tangled loose around her face. Her skin was pale, flushed unevenly from cold and panic. She wore a school-issued jacket that was too thin for the dropping temperature, and her hands shook violently in her lap. One sneaker lay a few feet away. When Rex stepped into the clearing, she gasped sharply and pulled her arms tighter around herself. Rex stopped instantly and lowered himself to the ground, ears forward, head tilted slightly to the side, the trained posture of a canine dog around frightened civilians. Evan stepped into view a moment later. "Hey," he said softly, palms open and visible. "It's okay. He won't hurt you." Her eyes flicked between Evan and Rex, fear sharp but edged with exhaustion. I thought you were..." Her voice cracked. "I thought something was following me." Rex stayed still. Evan crouched several feet away, keeping distance. "What's your name?" "Lucy," she whispered. "Lucy Harper." Lucy Harper was 12 years old, small-framed, with dirt smeared into the knees of her jeans and a faint scrape along her cheek. Her eyes were dark and glassy, wide with the kind of fear that came from being alone too long. Around her wrist was a thin braided bracelet, worn and fraying, the kind a parent might tie on a child before a trip. "I'm Evan," he said. "This is Rex." Rex's tail thumped once, slow and careful. Lucy swallowed. "Is he... police?" "No," Evan said quickly. "No police." Her shoulders dropped a fraction at that. "I got lost," Lucy said. "We're on a school camping trip. I went after my friend and couldn't find the trail again. My phone died." She fumbled weakly at her pocket, then shook her head. She tried to stand. The moment she put weight on her foot, she cried out and collapsed back against the tree, clutching her ankle. Evan moved without thinking, closing the distance just enough to see the swelling already blooming under her sock. "Don't move," he said, steady but gentle. "You'll make it worse." "I didn't mean to," Lucy whispered, tears spilling over now. "I didn't mean to mess everything up." Evan felt something tighten in his chest. "You didn't," he said. "Getting lost isn't messing up." Rex leaned forward and sniffed carefully near her ankle, then looked up at Evan, ears angling back slightly. The cold was already biting harder. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. "I don't know," Lucy said. "It got dark and then colder and I just sat down." Evan exhaled slowly. He thought about leaving, about pointing her toward the trail and walking away, about how easy it would be to disappear before anyone noticed him. Rex looked at him, not accusing, just waiting. Evan swore quietly under his breath. He shrugged off his jacket and draped it around Lucy's shoulders. She blinked up at him. "What about you?" "I'll be fine," he said, even though the cold immediately cut through his hoodie. Rex rose and positioned himself slightly between Lucy and the forest. Evan straightened and scanned the darkness beyond the clearing. "All right," he said quietly. "We're not staying here." Lucy's eyes widened. "You know where the camp is?" Rex lifted his head, sniffed the air, and turned slightly, nose angled deeper into the trees. Evan followed his gaze. A decision settled heavy and final in his chest. "I think we can find it," Evan said. The wind moved again through the pines, carrying the faintest hint of smoke and distant voices. So far away they might have been imagined. Evan took a step forward. Rex stepped with him. Lucy watched them both, fear and hope tangled together. And somewhere beyond the trees, no one yet knew she was missing. Evan didn't turn toward the road. That choice settled in him the moment Rex angled his head and breathed in, slow and deliberate, nose testing the air the way he'd been trained to do long before Evan knew him. The forest, for all its dangers, was quieter. It asked less. "We're not going that way," Evan said softly, more to Lucy than to Rex, though his eyes stayed on the dog. "Too far, too open." Lucy nodded without arguing. She had stopped trying to stand, stopped trying to pretend she was fine. Shock and exhaustion had thinned her voice to a thread. Evan shifted his weight, testing the ground with his boot, then crouched and turned his back to her. "I'm going to carry you, just for a bit." Lucy hesitated, then looped her arms around his shoulders, light as a bundle of sticks and heavier than she should have been at the same time. Evan stood slowly, feeling the pull in his lower back, the familiar warning ache. He adjusted his grip and waited for Rex. Rex stepped forward, sniffed the air again, then moved off at a diagonal, not straight into the trees, but along a narrow path where the ground dipped and rose in gentle waves. He paused after a few yards, glanced back to make sure they followed, then continued. Every few minutes he stopped, head turning as he tasted the wind, ears flicking at sounds Evan couldn't hear. When Lucy's breathing hitched and her grip tightened, Rex slowed without being told. Evan followed, boots careful, steps measured. He had learned to move like this out of necessity, how to distribute weight, how to pick ground that wouldn't slide, how to pause before the ache turned sharp. He remembered nights under overpasses and along riverbanks, how to read weather from the way leaves turned and how to keep a fire small enough to warm without announcing yourself. None of it felt heroic. It felt practical. Lucy rested her forehead against the back of his neck. "You're not going to the road," she murmured. "No," Evan said. "Camp's closer through here, if Rex can find it." Rex stopped again, nose low to the ground, then lifted his head and moved on. Evan caught the faintest hint of smoke then, thin and distant. He exhaled through his nose. "Good boy," he whispered. They moved deeper into the forest. The trees closed in, trunks dark and straight, branches knitting together overhead. The wind threaded through, colder now, tugging at Evan's sleeves. Lucy shivered. Evan shifted his jacket higher around her shoulders without breaking stride. Minutes stretched. The ache in Evan's back grew steady and familiar. He focused on his breathing and the rhythm of Rex's gait. In, out, step, step. A memory surfaced uninvited. A room with beige walls and a couch that smelled like cleaner. A woman with clipped sentences and a clipboard. Sarah, her name had been. Sarah had been tall and thin, hair pulled back tight, glasses that slid down her nose when she frowned. She had spoken kindly at first, the way people do when they expect compliance. Evan remembered the way her voice hardened when he refused to sit still, refused to answer questions that felt like traps. "We're trying to help you," she'd said, palms flat on the desk. "But you have to meet us halfway." He hadn't known how to explain that halfway felt like disappearing. Rex stopped abruptly. Evan nearly stumbled, then steadied himself. Rex stood rigid, ears pinned slightly back, body angled as if bracing against something unseen. His breathing quickened. For a moment he didn't look like a guide. He looked like a dog remembering something he wished he could forget. "It's okay," Evan murmured, leaning forward so Lucy wouldn't slide. "Hey, you're good. We're not there." Rex's ears twitched. He took one step, then another, slow at first, then steadier. Evan felt the tension drain a fraction from his shoulders. He had learned Rex's tells, the pauses that meant ghosts, not danger. Evan spoke quietly as they walked, nonsense words and low reassurances, the way he did on nights when thunder set Rex pacing. Lucy stirred. "He listens to you." Evan gave a short breath that might have been a laugh. "He listens to everyone who doesn't yell." They crossed a shallow stream, water cold and fast over smooth stones. Evan stepped carefully, testing each rock before committing his weight. Lucy gasped softly when her ankle jostled. Evan slowed, waited until her grip loosened again. "I'm sorry," Lucy whispered. "You're fine," Evan said. "Tell me if it hurts too much." She was quiet for a while, then asked, "How do you know where to go?" "I don't," Evan said honestly. "Rex does." She nodded, accepting that the way kids do when they've run out of energy to argue. After a moment she said, "My mom gave me this," and lifted her wrist enough for Evan to see the braided bracelet again, threads fraying. "She said it was for luck." Evan glanced at it. "Looks like it's working." Lucy's mouth twitched. "She worries a lot." "Most parents do," Evan said, and thought of Sarah again, of worry sharpened into rules. The forest shifted subtly as they climbed. The ground rose, then leveled. The air smelled less damp, more like smoke and fabric and people. Rex angled right, then left, correcting for the wind. He paused when Lucy's breathing grew shallow, sat for a moment, then rose and continued at a slower pace. Evan's arms began to burn. He adjusted Lucy higher, changed his grip. The ache spread across his shoulders and down his spine the way it always did when he carried more than his share. He welcomed it. Pain was simple. It didn't ask questions. Lucy tightened her arms and said very quietly, "Thank you, An." Evan blinked. "What?" "My grandma calls people that," she said. "It means the older brother." Evan swallowed. "You can just call me Evan." She nodded, then said it again, testing it. "Evan." They walked on. Rex stopped once more, head lifting as voices drifted faintly through the trees. Laughter, muffled, far away. Evan felt a small, fierce relief. He shifted his path slightly to avoid a fallen log, moved around it instead of over. He wasn't in a hurry now. He didn't need to be. Another memory tried to surface, hands on his shoulders, a door closing softly behind him. The word non-compliant, written somewhere, but he pushed it aside and focused on Rex's back, on Lucy's breathing, on the ground ahead. Rex slowed again, then stopped, looking back. Evan took that as permission to pause. He leaned against a tree, careful, letting Lucy slide down just enough to rest without standing. Rex sat close, body angled protectively, eyes scanning the dark. "We'll keep going," Evan said after a moment. "Just catching a breath." Lucy nodded, eyes half-lidded. "You didn't have to help me." Evan shrugged. "You were there." Rex rose, sniffed the air once more, then stepped forward with renewed certainty. The smell of smoke was stronger now. Fabric, food, people. Evan lifted Lucy again, set his jaw, and followed. They didn't reach the camp yet. The forest still wrapped around them, dense and dark, but the path felt clearer, less uncertain. Rex's pace evened out. Lucy's grip loosened, trust settling where fear had been. Behind them, the trees swallowed their footprints. Ahead, the forest thinned by degrees. And Evan kept walking, choosing the quiet path, trusting the instincts that had kept him alive this long. The cold settled in hard and fast, the kind that didn't announce itself until it was already inside your bones. Evan felt it first in his hands, then in the small of his back where the ache had spread from carrying Lucy for too long. Rex slowed without being told, ears swiveling, pace adjusting to Lucy's breathing as it turned shallow and uneven. When Evan shifted her higher, her body trembled against his chest, fine at first, then sharp, uncontrollable shivers that rattled her teeth. "We're stopping," Evan said, not asking. He scanned the trees and chose a shallow dip in the ground where the pines leaned inward, their lower branches thick enough to break the wind. He eased Lucy down onto a bed of needles and leaves, careful with her ankle, and shrugged his pack free. Rex circled once, nose low, then settled facing outward, a living wall between them and the dark. Evan worked quickly. He'd learned the order by necessity, shelter first, then heat, then everything else. He snapped dead branches by hand, selecting the dry ones by sound and weight, and built a small fire pit tucked against a fallen log. The flame he coaxed to life was modest, shielded by rocks and bark, just enough to glow. He angled the log to catch the wind, then draped his spare shirt between two branches to make a crude screen. The fire breathed. The cold pulled back a step. Lucy's shaking eased but didn't stop. Evan wrapped the jacket tighter around her shoulders and crouched close, rubbing warmth into her hands. "Stay with me," he said, not dramatic, just steady. Rex shifted nearer, the heat of his body radiating through his thick coat. A rustle moved beyond the firelight. Rex's head snapped up. A low warning bark cut the quiet, measured, controlled. The sound answered itself from farther away, something moving through brush with weight and impatience. Evan fed the fire a sliver of wood and waited. Whatever it was veered off, annoyed or cautious. Rex held his stance for a long moment, then eased back, eyes still scanning. Lucy swallowed. "Is it dangerous?" "Not if we're smart," Evan said. "He's got us." She nodded, trusting that more than his words. After a while, when the shaking slowed to a shiver she could manage, she spoke again, voice small. "I didn't get lost for nothing." Evan looked at her. "What do you mean?" "There was another girl," Lucy said, "younger, She panicked. "I went back because I didn't want her to be alone. I thought I saw her light. I didn't." The fire popped softly. Evan felt the truth of it settle. "You did the right thing," he said. He meant it, even knowing how often right choices ended badly. Lucy's eyes filled, relief and guilt tangled together, and she leaned her head against the log. The forest didn't sleep. It shifted and breathed, the wind threading through branches, the ground clicking and settling as animals moved beyond the edge of light. Rex stayed alert, occasionally rising to reposition, always placing himself between Lucy and the dark. Evan sat with his back to the log, knees drawn up, counting breaths and minutes, keeping the fire small. Across the miles of trees and dirt roads, the school's campsite hummed with rising noise. Lanterns flared to life, their white cones cutting across tents and tables. Sarah Collins stood near the fire ring, clipboard pressed flat against her jacket. She was in her late 30s, tall and straight-backed, hair pulled into a tight ponytail that never loosened even when she was exhausted. Years of managing classrooms had given her a voice that carried without shouting, and tonight she used it carefully. "Everyone stay where you are," she said, steady but strained. "We're checking names." The list didn't take long. When Lucy Harper's name echoed unanswered, the quiet that followed was sharp. Parents clustered closer, murmurs turning into questions. Sarah raised a hand. "Phone's out," she said. "But no running, not yet." Daniel Harper arrived as the wind picked up, his jacket unzipped, hair gone gray at the temples. He moved with the contained efficiency of someone used to pressure, shoulders squared, eyes assessing rather than panicking. He was in his early 40s, solidly built, the kind of man who spoke less than he listened. When Sarah told him Lucy was missing, he didn't interrupt. He nodded once. Where was she last seen? They told him. He looked at the trees, then back at the lanterns. "We'll organize," he said, quietly. No sirens, no uniforms yet. A parent protested, voice sharp with fear. Daniel met their eyes. "If we turn this into a spectacle, we scare kids who might already be scared. We don't need that." He pulled aside a handful of adults' camp staff and 2 parents who moved easily in the dark. "Pairs," he said. "Short sweeps. Listen more than you shout. If you find anything, come back." He paused. No chasing shadows. Thing. Back under the pines, Lucy drifted between waking and sleep, the fire painting her face amber. Evan kept her talking when her eyelids drooped, asking about school, about the bracelet on her wrist. She told him her mom tied it on the morning they left, fingers fumbling with the knot because she worried about everything. Evan listened and nodded, keeping his answers short. Rex stiffened again, then relaxed when the sound resolved into distant human voices carried thin on the wind. Evan caught it too muffled, careful. He didn't move. He let the forest decide when to give them up. "Someone's looking," Lucy murmured. "Yeah," Evan said. "They are." The fire burned low. Evan fed it a final sliver, then settled back. He felt the cold, the ache, the weight of waiting, and stayed anyway. The forest watched. Somewhere nearby, lantern light bobbed and voices called names softly, trying not to frighten anyone who might be listening. They held there, quiet and alive, until the night leaned closer and the search drew nearer, but not close enough yet to change what came next. Rex lifted his head before Evan smelled it. The dog's posture changed, first ears angling forward, nostrils flaring as he drew in the air with slow, deliberate breaths. Evan felt the shift through the leashless space between them, the way you feel a storm change direction before the rain hits. Then it reached him too. Smoke, faint and clean. Not the sharp bite of burning pine, but the softer mix of fabric, food, and people. Campfire smoke. Human smoke. "That's it," Evan murmured, more to himself than anyone else. He crouched, slid his arms under Lucy, and lifted her again. The movement sent a hard protest through his shoulders and down his spine. He paused, set his stance, and adjusted his grip until the pain settled into something he could carry. Lucy's head lolled against his shoulder, her breathing shallow and uneven. Rex took 3 steps, stopped, then looked back to make sure they followed. He angled away from the wind this time, choosing a line that would keep the scent steady instead of letting it scatter. Every few minutes he checked the air again, correcting by inches. The corrections were trusted without thinking. This was Rex's work. Evan's job was to keep moving. They left the shelter dip and climbed. The ground grew firmer, less slick, the forest thinning in places where old logging tracks had scarred the earth years ago. Evan picked his steps carefully, favoring the stronger side when his back flared. Lucy shivered again, smaller this time, the kind of tremor that came from exhaustion rather than cold. "Hey," Evan said quietly, keeping his voice even. "Talk to me." Lucy stirred. "About what?" "Anything," he said. "Tell me something boring." She huffed a weak breath that might have been a laugh. "I hate math." "Fair," Evan said. "Me too." Rex paused at a fallen branch and stepped over it neatly. Evan went around. Lucy's grip tightened when her ankle jostled. Evan slowed, murmuring nonsense until her fingers loosened again. The smoke grew stronger, and with it came a faint glow through the trees, lantern light diffused by needles and bark, distant but unmistakable. Lucy's eyelids fluttered. "Are we there?" "Almost," Evan said. It was a lie softened into truth by distance. He needed her awake, not accurate. Behind them, the forest kept its counsel. Ahead, the light pulsed and steadied, lanterns swinging as people moved. At the campsite, Daniel Harper crouched at the edge of the clearing, one knee down, fingers brushing the dirt. He was careful not to touch what didn't need touching. Years in uniform had taught him how easily a well-meaning boot could erase a story. He traced a line with his eyes instead, the subtle scuff where a large dog's hind paw had pushed off, the spacing between prints too consistent to be wild. "German Shepherd," he said quietly. Sarah Collins stood a few steps back, holding a lantern chest high. The light caught the tight set of her jaw and the worry she tried to keep out of her voice. "You're sure?" Daniel nodded. "Trained. The gate's wrong for feral." He straightened and looked into the trees. "There's a dog out there doing its job." A parent shifted anxiously. "Then send everyone." "No," Daniel said, calm but firm. "We don't flood the area. We let the dog work." He scanned the line of adults. "Pairs only, shallow sweeps. No yelling unless you hear a reply. And no one goes past the creek." He let the instruction sit. "We don't want to scramble scent." Sarah met his eyes and nodded. She turned and relayed the orders, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She had learned long ago how fear spread faster than fire if you let it. Back on the trail, Rex stopped again, head lifting as if the light itself had weight. He glanced back, tail low but wagging once, controlled. Evan smiled despite the burn in his shoulders. "Good boy," he breathed. Lucy's head tipped back. "It's bright," she murmured. "Yeah," Evan said. "Keep looking at it." The forest opened in small increments, now gaps between trunks where light spilled and shadows thinned. Evan's breath came rougher. He shifted Lucy higher, jaw clenched against the spike of pain that shot through his lower back. He counted steps, then breaths, then Rex's footfalls. Anything to keep from stopping. Lucy sagged again, her words slurring. "My dad's... he won't be mad." "I know," Evan said quickly. "He'll just be glad." She nodded, eyes closing. "No," Evan said, sharper than he meant to be. He softened it immediately. "Hey, stay with me. Tell me about your bracelet." Lucy's fingers moved weakly against his collar. "Mom says, it's for when you get scared. You pull it. It means... come back." Evan swallowed. "Then pull it." She did, the small motion grounding her just enough. Rex slowed again, waiting until Lucy's breathing evened before moving on. The glow ahead resolved into shapes tent lines, a table edge, the curve of a lantern hook. Voices carried now, low and careful. Evan veered slightly to avoid a cluster of roots and felt the path firm underfoot. He didn't step into the light yet. He let Rex lead them to the edge where shadow met brightness. At the campsite, Daniel raised a hand when a shout threatened to rise. "Wait," he said. He tilted his head, listening. "There." A shape moved at the tree line, a dog's silhouette cut cleanly against the lantern glow, ears up, body steady. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest he hadn't realized was locked. Rex stepped forward, stopped, and looked back one last time. Evan followed, the light washing over them in a rush. He didn't drop Lucy. He didn't hurry. He walked until the forest gave way completely, and the camp stood open before them, alive with breath and warmth. Lucy's eyes fluttered open. "You didn't leave," she whispered, more question than statement. "No," Evan said. I didn't. Rex stood tall at his side, chest out, eyes scanning until the noise settled. Somewhere nearby, Daniel took a slow breath and lifted his hand, not to rush forward, not to crowd, but to signal calm. Respect, he thought, for whoever had carried his daughter this far. Respect for the dog that had led them home. Evan stopped at the edge of the clearing, light full on his face now, the ache in his back loud and undeniable. He held Lucy steady, waiting for someone else to close the distance, for the night to finish what it had started without turning him into something to be chased. The lanterns swayed, the voices hushed, and the light held. The camp surged toward them all at once, lanterns swinging, flashlights cutting frantic arcs through the air, voices rising in overlapping relief. Evan felt the sound hit him like a wave. He slowed instinctively, keeping Lucy steady, letting Rex hold position at his side. The light was too bright, the attention too sharp. Old reflexes tugged at him. Step back, melt into the dark. Don't give anyone a reason to ask your name. "Lucy!" someone cried, a woman's voice breaking open the night. Sarah Collins was the first adult to reach them, breathless from running, clipboard abandoned somewhere behind her. Up close she looked thinner than Evan expected, tall and straight-backed, eyes ringed with exhaustion she tried to keep from her face. She stopped short when she saw the dog and the boy carrying the child, then checked herself, lowering her hands. Years of classroom instincts kicked in, calm first, crowd later. "I've got her," she said gently, not touching yet. "You did great. We're here." Two parents hovered behind her, ready to rush. Daniel Harper cut through from the side and lifted a hand. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. He stood a few paces away, solid and still, eyes on Rex first, then Evan. Daniel's hair was wind-tossed now, his jacket dusted with pine needles, but his posture hadn't changed. He recognized the way the dog held himself, the controlled scan, the measured distance, the discipline that didn't come from fear. He recognized the way the boy stopped just shy of the light, waiting to be told what to do without asking. "Easy," Daniel said. "Let them breathe." The words settled the crowd. Lanterns dipped, flashlights angled down. Sarah nodded and gestured for space. "Blankets," she said, "and the kit." Evan eased Lucy down onto a folding bench, his arms trembling now that the work had an end point. He kept one hand at her back until someone slid a blanket around her shoulders. Lucy's face was pale, lips tinged blue, but her eyes were open. She squeezed Evan's fingers once, hard, as if afraid he might disappear if she let go. A nurse chaperone knelt in front of her. A woman in her late 20s with dark hair pulled into a practical bun, cheeks flushed from the cold. She introduced herself softly, checked Lucy's ankle with careful hands, shone a penlight across her pupils. "Sprain, maybe a fracture," she said, calm and competent. "She's cold and exhausted. We'll warm her up here." Rex stood guard without being asked, positioning himself between Lucy and the milling bodies. When a parent stepped too close, he shifted, not aggressive, just firm. Daniel noticed and moved a fraction closer, speaking low. "He's working," he told them. "Give him room." Evan stepped back, the way he always did when adults took over. He felt the pull of the trees at his shoulders, the familiar urge to slip away before questions found him. He took one step, then another. Lucy noticed. Her hand shot out, catching his sleeve. Her fingers were small but strong. "Don't," she said, voice hoarse. "Don't go." The word landed between them like a stake in the ground. Evan froze. Daniel saw it. He closed the remaining distance slowly, stopping where Evan could see his hands, palms open. "She's right," Daniel said, not commanding, not pleading. "Don't go yet." Evan shook his head once, barely. "You don't owe anyone anything," Daniel continued, cutting gently through the protest. "Not me, not them." He glanced around the camp, then back at Evan. "But if you leave now, she'll think you disappeared on purpose." Lucy tightened her grip, eyes shining. "You said you wouldn't," she whispered. Evan swallowed. He hadn't promised. He hadn't planned to stay. The ache in his back flared, reminding him he was still here, still seen. Rex leaned against his leg, solid and warm, as if to anchor him. Sarah approached again, slower this time. "We can keep this simple," she said. "Warmth, quiet, no questions." "No." She shot a look over her shoulder at the parents, and they backed off another step. The nurse wrapped another blanket around Lucy and offered her a cup of warm water. Lucy drank carefully, eyes never leaving Evan. When she finished, she leaned back and let out a shaky breath. "You didn't leave," she said, more certain now. "No," Evan said. His voice surprised him with its steadiness. "I didn't." Daniel nodded once, satisfied, then turned to Sarah. "Call it in," he said. "Medical transport on standby, not sirens. We don't need to make this louder than it is." Sarah moved off to make the call. Around them, the camp began to reassemble itself, tense, rustling. A pot set back on a burner, someone handing out cocoa with shaking hands. Relief had a sound, Evan realized. It was messy and human and not at all quiet. A man Evan didn't know, a stocky parent with a red beard, stepped forward, then stopped himself when Daniel's eyes flicked his way. "Thank you," the man said instead, awkward but sincere. Evan nodded and looked down, unsure where to put his hands. Rex finally relaxed enough to sit, tongue lolling, eyes still alert. A child approached and stopped short, awed. "Is he a police dog?" the child asked. Daniel answered before Evan could. "He's a good dog," he said. "That's enough." The nurse finished securing Lucy's ankle and tucked the blanket tighter. "She's stable," she announced. "Cold, tired, but stable." A cheer threatened to rise. Daniel lifted his hand again, and it quieted. He crouched to Lucy's level, voice soft. "You did great," he said. "You hear me?" Lucy nodded, tears finally spilling. "He carried me," she said, pointing with her chin at Evan. "All the way." Daniel looked up at Evan, really looked at him this time. Not the clothes, not the posture, the choices. "Thank you," Daniel said. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Evan shrugged, uncomfortable with the weight of it. She couldn't walk. "That's enough," Daniel replied. Evan took another half step back, then stopped himself. He wasn't running, not yet. He stood where the light reached him and let the night finish catching up. Lucy reached for him again, fingers brushing his wrist. "You can stay," she said, tentative but hopeful. "Just for a minute." Evan hesitated, then nodded once. Rex leaned closer, satisfied. The camp breathed. Lanterns steadied. The forest eased its hold. No one was left behind. Morning arrived quietly, not with birdsong or alarms, but with a slow thinning of the dark. Pine Creek breathed out mist that curled between tents like steam from a held cup, and the cold loosened its grip 1 careful degree at a time. Dew stitched silver lines along the grass. The forest looked ordinary again. Tall trunks, clean air, a sky rinsed pale blue, nothing like the place that had tested them through the night. Evan woke before anyone told him to. Habit did that. He lay still for a moment, cataloging the unfamiliar softness beneath him, the steady rise and fall at his side. Rex was asleep, chin on his paws, flank warm against Evan's ribs. The dog's ears didn't twitch. No patrol, no counting breaths. Evan waited for the reflex to kick in, get up, scan, move. But it didn't. He let the quiet stay. Outside the tent, footsteps approached and stopped at a respectful distance. Daniel Harper's shadow cut a clean line across the canvas before he spoke. "Morning," he said, voice low, careful not to pull the day open too fast. Daniel was built like a man who had learned to stand without wasting motion-broad shoulders, an economy to the way he shifted his weight. The night had left marks on him too, a crease between his brows, pine needles still caught in the seams of his jacket. He waited until Evan answered before coming closer. "Morning," Evan said, sitting up. Rex opened one eye, assessed, then closed it again. Daniel nodded, a small smile ghosting across his face. "Lucy's awake, eating, complaining about oatmeal." Evan felt something in his chest unhook. "She okay?" "Sprain," Daniel said. "Nothing broken. Cold did more damage than the fall." He paused. "She asked for you." Evan didn't move. The request carried weight. Daniel saw the hesitation and lifted a hand. "No rush. I wanted to say something first." They walked a few steps from the tent, stopping where the light filtered through branches and landed soft on the ground. A camp kettle clicked off nearby. Sarah Collins crossed the clearing with a clipboard tucked under her arm, posture already squared for the day. She offered Evan a nod, not the brisk teacher nod, but a human one, then kept moving. Daniel faced Evan fully. "Thank you," he said, "for not leaving my daughter behind." Evan shrugged, eyes on the ground. "She couldn't walk." "That's what makes it matter," Daniel replied. He didn't push. He let the words settle like frost, melting slow, honest. "You're not in trouble. There won't be a uniform waiting." No questions you don't agree to answer. Evan lifted his gaze, searching for the catch. Daniel met it without flinching. You don't owe me anything, Daniel continued. I'm asking if you'll stay through breakfast. After that, we decide nothing unless you want to. The offer landed differently than orders ever had. Evan nodded once. Okay. Rex rose and stretched, shook off the night, then leaned into Evan's leg. Daniel noticed the dog's bearing even now, the way he checked edges without needing to. He's trained, Daniel said, not a question. Was, Evan corrected softly. Search and rescue. Before. Daniel didn't ask for the rest. If you're open to it, he said, I can make some calls, not to pull him back into what broke him, to recognize what he already is. He smiled at Rex. Support K9, different lane. Evan's breath caught. He won't be taken? No, Daniel said. He'll be named. Breakfast happened without ceremony. Paper cups, steam, the taste of sugar after a long night. Lucy sat bundled on a camp chair, ankle elevated, hair a wild halo from sleep. She brightened when she saw Evan and lifted her mug in a solemn toast. You stayed. Just for breakfast, Evan said, and she grinned like she'd won something anyway. Lucy's teacher hovered close, fussing gently. A parent offered Evan a jacket. He accepted it this time. No one crowded, no one asked for papers. It felt like learning the new language where pauses mattered. Later, when the sun climbed high enough to warm the tent flaps, Daniel returned with news. I spoke to a handler I trust, he said. Rex can be evaluated on your terms. No kennels, no separation. Evan knelt and pressed his forehead to Rex's. The dog breathed him in, tail thumping once. You okay? Evan whispered. Rex licked his chin. Daniel watched, something like relief loosening his shoulders. There's another thing, he added. A program, small, voluntary. Teens who work with dogs, obedience, scent games, trails. You choose when to show up, or you don't. Evan sat back on his heels. Choice sounded like a trick word until it wasn't. I don't do systems, he said. Daniel nodded. Then don't. This isn't one. They walked Lucy back to the infirmary tent when she tired, and the camp resumed its ordinary noise zippers, laughter that came easier now, a map folded and refolded until it fit. By late morning, vans idled at the edge of the clearing, engines quiet, ready without pressing. Evan packed his few things, not because he was leaving, because packing reminded him he could. Rex nosed the zipper closed and sat, satisfied. Lucy returned on crutches, eyes bright. You can come to school, she said, as if it were the simplest solution. I'll tell them about the boy and the dog in the woods. Evan smiled, small and real. Maybe, he said. We'll see. They stood together at the tree line when it was time, no hands on shoulders, no last-minute bargains. The sun poured through the branches, warm and ordinary, catching dust in the air. Daniel extended his hand, then stopped, reading Evan's face. He lowered it. Whatever you choose, he said, you're welcome. Evan nodded. He didn't promise. He didn't run. He stepped into the light and let it touch him. Rex sat at his side, no longer guarding. Lucy laughed at something Sarah said. The forest released them. No one was kept. No one was taken. They chose to stay together, for now, and that was enough. This story is not about heroes with titles or people who are easy to trust. It is about what happens when someone chooses not to walk away. In everyday life, we pass quiet moments like this all the time. A person who needs help but does not ask loudly. A situation where stopping feels inconvenient or risky. A choice between protecting ourselves or protecting someone else for a few steps longer. Evan did not save Lucy because he was brave or prepared. He stayed because leaving would have cost him more than staying. That is a truth we all recognize, even if we do not always follow it. Sometimes doing the right thing does not look dramatic. It looks like patience. It looks like staying calm. It looks like giving someone warmth, time, or dignity when the world is rushing past. And sometimes the smallest mercy becomes the moment that changes more than one life. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about a moment when you chose not to walk away. Subscribe to the channel so more stories like this can reach the people who need them. May God bless everyone watching today. May He protect those who feel lost, unseen, or forgotten. And if this message spoke to your heart, write Amen in the comments.